friends, we're going to go now to our final speaker for the day, Varad Mukhedkar. Varad is actually back by popular demand. He was a presenter at our first mental health forum, and he struck a chord with everyone in the audience. And so we thought how appropriate to invite him back to a youth mental health forum, as he is a youth. Varad is currently in his second year of university studying accounting and finance at UWA. In 2021, Varad lost his dear friend Michael to suicide, just 1 week into the start of their university journey. Since then, Varad has been involved with mental health organizations such as Man Up and Zero to Hero. He will share his personal experience of losing Michael, the impact it's had on him, and the role toxic masculinity plays in our society, and what we can do to reduce the threats it poses. So please welcome Varad to the podium.
Beautiful. Sorry. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. And Luke and Donna, absolutely amazing. I could genuinely listen to you guys talk all day. They've achieved so much. I think my biggest achievement is I made one TikTok that went viral. So compared to these two, I don't have much going on for me. But it's honestly really great to be back. Thank you so much for having me back. I spoke last time about my journey, my story of losing one of my best mates, Michael. And it was really special for me that everyone was so receptive to it. Everyone was so welcoming of it. So I just want to say another big thank you to that. But today I'm going to be talking a bit more about toxic masculinity and the role that plays in our society. So for a bit of context, as mentioned, I'm quite involved in this awesome organization called Man Up, which was set up in 2019 by two amazing guys, Gareth Shantakumar and Hasib Riaz. And basically this organization was created because these two guys saw a gap in our system, our educational system, and just our system as a society, where boys had a very wrong perception of what it meant to be a good man, and especially when it came to relationships, respecting women, concept of consent was highly misunderstood. So they wanted to basically go on this journey of redefining masculinity. So the name Man Up, if I ask most of you, what does Man Up mean? We'd probably say it means to be strong. It means that when life gets hard, you keep going. It means to be physically strong, never show your emotions. Like a traditional man, shouldn't dance, shouldn't wear jewelry, should be the breadwinner, that kind of vibe. But of course, here in this context, our mission is to kind of change the meaning of Man Up and take it from being a good man is not really about being a good man, but it's about being a good human, if you know what I mean. It's not about being that traditional concept. It's just about being a good human. So I thought I'd Google what it means, what toxic masculinity actually is, because we talk about it so much at Man Up, but we never really put a definition on it. So Google says it's a set of attitudes and ways of behaving stereotypically associated with men and is regarded as having a negative impact on men and society as a whole. And I'd probably personally have to highly agree with that definition. Normally, Google's definitions are a bit dodgy, but this one I think captures it pretty well. So what are these stereotypical behaviors that are mentioned? I think when we look at those toxic behaviors, I think ones that come to mind are that disrespect towards women, that hypersexuality that we see in our society, the high levels of drinking, intoxication, road rage that we see, that general level of anger. These are the kind of toxic traits we associate with toxic masculinity. And that's the thing. I think toxic masculinity is heightened, especially in a group setting. I've heard so many stories of girls who'll be like, oh, this guy's a really lovely guy, but, as soon as he's around his mates, he kind of changes. As soon as the boys come together, they tend to change quite a bit. And I think it comes from that concept of acceptance. Luke was talking about belonging. I think by ourselves, guys are quite respectful, but as soon as we come into that group setting, there's always that need to want to impress others. There's always that need to want to fit in. And unfortunately, the society we live in is that the values of toxic masculinity are what are accepted. So guys are subconsciously feeling, if I want to be accepted in this society, I got to behave in a certain way. I got to go to my mates, and being accepted isn't about, oh, I did well on the test on the weekend, or, like things are going well at home. Getting accepted is, like I got 3 girls on the weekend. I'm talking to 2 more girls right now. It's all very negative culture. Now, moving on, I think we think naturally that it's basic human etiquette to respect one another, to respect others for being different. And on a very grand scale, and something which isn't talked enough about to young boys, is the concept of consent. We go around to schools in Man Up. So I didn't explain what we actually do. We go to schools and we open up these conversations. And one of our big conversations are around sexual consent. And it's amazing how many of these boys from year 7 to 11 don't have any concept of it. We have this activity that we run called the traffic light activity, where we put out a red light, an orange light, and a green light. And we basically put out scenarios to the boys, asking them, if you were in this situation, would you have consent or not? So if they have consent, they'd put it in the green. And there's simple ones, like we'll ask boys, you walk into a party and you see a girl wearing revealing clothing. Do you have consent? You're not sure, or you don't have consent. And so many of these boys will put it in the green zone, thinking that, if a female's at a party wearing revealing clothing, it means that she wants to have sex. And it's this kind of attitude, this kind of value, which I think is one of the biggest issues with toxic masculinity. I mean, 1 in 3 women globally, I think, have faced some form of sexual assault. And when it comes to sexual harassment, I think it's pretty much 1 in 1. I think most women could probably recount a story where they were sexually harassed or sexually assaulted in some way. And that's why it's so important that we cut this down at an early age. It's almost like this a kind of primal mindset that's engaged within these boys. And a concept we talk a lot about at Man Up is that pack mentality, where we feel the need to assert our power as men, belittle the weak one. It truly is like a pack. In a herd, you see there's kind of a weakling, someone who's a bit injured, like an animal. And always, that'll be the one who's sidelined. And it kind of translates into our society, where if you're different in some way, if you got some kind of weakness, a lot of boys see it as, this is our chance to pounce on that guy. It's all about that race to see who can become the alpha at the top of the pack. And again, that's what we try to move away from. And one of the methods we use to move away from that pack mentality is the concept of call-out culture, which we talk a lot about. It's very easy for teachers to kind of stand their students and say, don't fall to peer pressure, If someone's doing something wrong, stand up, call it out. But it is very, very hard to do. So that's one of the things we do with the boys, where we think about ways that we can call out this negative behavior. It doesn't necessarily have to be facing the person in the eye and saying, you can't say this about women. But one of the smallest things you can do is just not laugh. The other thing you can do is kind of turn the joke back onto them. So we kind of look at different ways that boys can navigate the space and try to break down these values without having to put too much on the line, if you know what I mean. So I probably want to recount a story now, though, because so often we look at toxic masculinity as an issue that men need to solve themselves. It's something that men need to do, that introspection on themselves, and think, well, what are we doing wrong? But we were at a school with our Man Up session, at Arranmore School. It's a lovely school. We went there to run a session, and we were in this session talking to the boys about opening up and speaking to one another. And we asked the boys, well, why is it that you don't feel comfortable talking to each other? Because we're all happy. I found it myself. I think most men here could agree that we're happy to talk about sport, we're happy to talk about games, we're happy to talk about girls, but no one's really happy to sit and talk about our emotions. And this boy looked to me and said, well, we actually are happy to talk about our emotions. We are happy. It's just that the girls always belittle us when we do. He said, when we are talking about these kinds of things, they'll call us weak, or they'll make fun. Even the girls will look at these guys and say, look at you girls, talking about your emotions. And I think that really struck a chord with me, because I realized that it's not just men that are perpetuating this issue of toxic masculinity. It's society as a whole. It's women as well. It's not like one is doing more than the other. Sure, men can do a lot of introspection. This education is so important, especially around consent. But it is an issue that the whole of society needs to face, that's being perpetuated by everyone. So, yeah, the education needs to be there for both the boys and the girls. Now, last time I was here speaking about Mike's passing, but today I've focused a lot more on the hypersexual culture that we see in our society. But another huge component of this toxic masculinity is what I just mentioned, that fact that men shouldn't talk about their struggles. 7 out of 9 daily suicides in Australia are attributed to males, yet males are far less likely to seek help than women. And that kind of lays the foundational concrete for toxic masculinity, because no one kind of wakes up one day and decides to kind of take their own life. It's kind of a building block process. It slowly chips away with them. And that was the same thing with Michael. It wasn't just one thing that happened one day. Sure, there was a final thing that happened, which was kind of like the knockout blow, but it was a slow build-up. It was a slow build-up of one issue to the next, like a bottle slowly filling up. And it was because of that ingrained value in toxic masculinity that men can't talk, which I think made things a lot worse for Michael. In fact, it is such a complicated thing. I've spent so long trying to think about, why did Michael take his own life? What was the reasons? I've sat there like the whole night with like a notes sheet trying to figure out, like it's a maths equation, what went wrong? These are the top reasons. It's hard to put a pinpoint on it. But one thing I'm absolutely sure of is that he felt ashamed to ask for help. And that to me, that's quite sad. He felt ashamed. And kind of when he did ask for help, because he did tell me he was struggling, but when he kind of opened up his emotions to the boys, he left the boys' Snapchat group one day. And everyone kind of had that perception like, oh, it's a bit pathetic, Like, look at this guy, like, almost like creating a bit of a scene kind of thing. Yeah, and I think in hindsight, I can't help but feel a lot of shame. I think all us boys do, because to lose someone in that way, but look back in hindsight and realize that it's like seeing someone drowning almost, When someone is drowning, you'd imagine that everyone would do everything in their power to try help. But in this situation, Michael was drowning. But rather than going to help him, everyone kind of almost just stood there and laughed at him. Like, not laughed at him. I mean, of course we didn't, but it definitely feels like we just stood there, and let it happen. And to me, the foundational layer of that is that concept of toxic masculinity. At the end of the day, it's not like it was our fault. It's not like the boys in our group didn't care about Michael. But it was because that's kind of the way we grew up. That this is the way a man should be. This is what's accepted, If a girl was struggling, by all means, come, like, we'll talk about it. But, like, if a guy is struggling, it's like, deal with it yourself, man. Because I've dealt with my own issues by myself. You should deal with your own issues by yourself as well. So, yeah, definitely a reflection on society as a whole there. But then we look at the kind of aspect, okay, we've looked at the hypersexual culture, we've looked at that fact that men can't talk, but what are the solutions? And in my opinion, I would say there are 3 kind of main solutions. One is education. Secondly is encouraging males to talk. And the third one is role modeling. Looking at toxic masculinity, again, like I said, the build-up, it's not just one issue or another. It's not like toxic masculinity, we need to stop drinking. We need guys to stop disrespecting women. That's the end goal. But it's the little moments that count. And it starts from a young age. And I kind of refer to it at Man Up as that footy coach mentality. That kind of thing where the 8-year-old kid falls over on the ground and it's like, get up, mate. Come on, like, be tough. Don't be a little girl. Don't be a wimp. Get up and keep going. It's those simple things where, like, can you imagine, you say to an 8-year-old kid, he's having a hard day, and you say, don't cry, mate. Come on, boys, don't cry. Be tough, be tough. That translates into something so much worse down the track. Because that kid at that age feels like, all right, like, I look at my sister and, when she's struggling, like, mum and dad are always there to kind of console her. When I'm struggling, it's something I need to deal with myself. So by the time they're 18, 19, become an adult, those values are still ingrained in them. That this is the way I need to go about life. It's not about asking for help. It's about dealing with it myself. So it's about starting it from a young age. We think courage is diving headfirst at the footy. In Australia, we always think about footy. That's our national sport, you know. We think courage is diving headfirst at the footy. But real courage, and I think I said it in the last time I spoke, is having the simple conversation about how you really are. And despite saying that it starts young, at a young age, at the age of 50, you can still be having these conversations. Even my own dad, I think, after Michael passed away, even he started to open up conversations a lot more. Even he started to talk to us about his mental health and his struggles, which when we were younger, we never really saw much of. So it's never too late to create this change. And even if you're not doing it for yourself, to do it for the people around you. Because as a guy at the age of 40, you might feel comfortable in your masculinity. You might feel like, I'm confident with who I am, I can navigate my way through society. But you might not realize that your best friend, you know, your work colleague, your brother could be struggling so much with that concept. And you could do so much just by opening up that simple conversation. I think we're kind of getting to the stage where I've spoken for a bit too long. But yeah, no, I think I just wrap that up by saying toxic masculinity is an issue for society to deal with, not just men. And it's going to be solved through education, through positive role modeling. And if there's one final message I'd leave with, it's, yes, simply opening up the conversation, not just for men, but for women as well. There's so much power in a female going up to a male and making them feel like they can talk. So yeah, thank you so much for having me speak today. Appreciate it.